In lesson 2, we're going to talk about what kinds of punctuations indicate a pause. So remember that there's several punctuation marks that we can use that indicate pauses in writing. There's not just one type. Okay, so one type is commas, and commas are usually a short pause. They separate clauses in compound or complex sentences. They separate list items, so items in a list. Okay, and they set off introductory words or phrases. Now, the next type is ellipses, and ellipses are those 3 dots, or 3 periods that you use, a series of dots, and these indicate an omission or pause. So something was left out or interrupted, right? There's a pause there because something is missing from that part. And then the third kind is a dash, and a dash is more of a more abrupt kind of pause in a sentence. Okay, and we're going to watch some videos on the comma and the dash, and it'll explain a little bit more how dashes are used in sentences. Okay, and then again, just another reminder, Word and Google Docs and Grammarly can check your conventions for you. Conventions include grammar, spelling, punctuation, and capitalization. So make sure that you use those. If you're not sure how to use those, make sure you check the videos that are linked below this video with instructions on how to change your settings so it checks those and how to use it. Okay, let's go ahead and watch the videos about commas, and then we'll watch one about dashes.
Hello, grammarians. Today, Paige and I are going to teach you all about your new best friend, the comma. It is a piece of punctuation that has many functions, and we're just going to broadly overview them today. The comma is an extremely powerful piece of punctuation. It can do a whole bunch of stuff. So, Paige, what is the most pertinent or important thing that the comma does?
I would probably say that it is separating sentence elements.
Okay. So that's its broad superpower.
Exactly.
But it can also, lots of stuff falls under that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it's it has laser vision, but it can not only use that laser vision to boil water, but it can also cut through steel.
Exactly.
So this is a superhero punctuation mark. I'll make that into a C for comma. So how is the comma going to save the day today? How's it going to make our sentences make sense? What are some of the things that it separates?
So it can separate elements of lists.
Mm-hmm. For lunch I had tofu, comma, spam, comma, and seaweed. Very Hawaiian lunch.
Mm-hmm. Delicious.
So that's a way in which we can. So it's separating these elements of this list. I guess commas can also separate dates.
That's right.
Dates and times. So, for example, here in the United States, National Blueberry Muffin Day is July 11th. And if we wanted to refer to a historical Blueberry Muffin Day, let's say July 11th, comma, 1981.
Wow.
It was the best muffin day ever.
That I wish I could have been around for.
Yeah. Okay, so a comma can separate lists, and it can be used for dates, and we can also set off things at the beginning of sentences. Basically, everything is great.
Right.
So the comma has a bunch of different functions. It's this super useful multi-tool. It's this superhero of a piece of punctuation. So we're not going to cover all of that in this video. The most important thing to remember about the comma is what it does is separate sentence elements. It can separate clauses, it can separate items in a list, it can separate dates. Usually when you're trying to make a separation within a sentence, you use a comma. So Paige, what are some things that commas can't do?
That's a great question. So commas can't go at the end of a sentence.
Okay, so I couldn't be I want to go swimming comma, and that couldn't I couldn't end a sentence that way.
Right. You need to say something after the comma.
So this is no good.
No.
Or you have to keep going. Like,
Right.
I want to go swimming, and then sailing, and end it with a period like that.
Yes.
Okay, so that would be fine. That's totally fine usage for a comma if it's in the middle of a sentence, but not at the end of a sentence.
Right.
Okay, so commas only go in the middle.
Yeah.
So, comma separates stuff, which therefore means it has to be in between something.
Right. There has to be something to the left and something to the right.
Cool. All right. That's a comma.
Yeah.
Would you say?
I think we have successfully met the comma.
Cool. You can learn anything. David out.
Page out.
Hey, grammarians. Hey, Paige.
Hi, David.
Today we're going to talk about dashes, which is a piece of punctuation. Looks kind of like this. It's just kind of a straight line. Later we're going to talk about hyphens, which looks like this. And there is a difference between the two of them. It's kind of confusing, but first we're just going to talk about dashes, what they are, and what they do.
Okay, sounds good to me.
So dashes have approximately 4 uses. Use number 1 is that they can mark interruptions in the structure of a sentence. As in, I ran to the bus stop, but the bus had already driven away. So we're using this dash to interrupt the structure of this sentence.
Okay, but couldn't you just put a comma there?
You know, you totally could. You absolutely could use a comma instead of a dash. But the dash has this feeling, and I'm going to make up a word here, it feels more interrupty.
Okay. Right, so a comma sort of helps the sentence keep flowing, and the dash kind of stops it for a second.
And even though grammatically those two sentences are identical, right? I ran to the bus stop, comma, but the bus had already driven away. Even though that's technically that means the exact same thing as I ran to the bus stop, dash, but the bus had already driven away. This is kind of like an abrupt cut off. So like the comma, right, the dash is uniting these two independent clauses. I ran to the bus stop, the bus had already driven away, right? So like, comma, but would connect those two independent clauses the same way that dash, but is connecting those two clauses. But it has a slightly different connotation. It's just more abrupt in the way that it connects these two things together.
Okay. Also, it looks like you don't have a space before or after your dash. Is that right?
So originally when I drawn it, it did look a lot closer. But yes, according to the Chicago Manual of Style that Khan Academy uses, it would just go word, dash, word, then a space. But when you're using dashes, generally, you don't put spaces in between them. In between words.
Right.
So that's use number 1. It can interrupt the structure of a sentence. Use number 2 for the dash is that they can act like parentheses in pairs.
So the dash is in the same place as another type of punctuation could be again?
Correct.
Okay.
The dash, I guess, is kind of like... So let's look at another example sentence and I'll switch colors. The bug, which landed on my nose, had to be the size of a softball. Enormous bug. But Paige, as you rightly pointed out, this is the same as having it in parentheses. You wouldn't have both of these together like that.
But they do the same thing.
But they have the exact same function.
In this case.
So when you have them in pairs, like so, it's the bug, which landed on my nose, had to be the size of a softball. So it's kind of this aside. If we really wanted to, we could take it right out of the sentence, kind of like in a positive, right, with commas. So we could say the bug had to be the size of a softball. Sentence still makes sense.
Right.
Use number 3, a dash can be used where you would otherwise use a colon.
So in this case, it's going to be sort of introducing something, right?
Mm-hmm. So the colon has this linking power, right? It can introduce ideas. It can start a list. You can do the same thing with a dash. So, for example, if we wanted to introduce an idea, we could say...
I have only ever wanted one thing. Snacks.
Me too, Paige.
So many snacks.
Me too. So we're using this to introduce this idea the same way that we would had it been a colon.
Okay. So the dash is like a little actor.
Yeah. Yeah, the dash is like an actor that can just do the jobs of all these other punctuation marks.
Right.
So it can be parentheses, it can be a colon.
It can be
like a comma sometimes.
Yeah. Wow.
That is a talented little guy.
Seriously, I'm very impressed.
And the fourth use of the dash is, again, to indicate interruptions, but specifically to indicate interruptions in speech.
This is like its own little special thing.
Yeah.
It's not acting like anything else.
Nope.
Just indicating interruption, as it does. Watch out for that!
Wham! So we're using this dash to say that this sentence was interrupted by something, and then we deploy this sound effect. But it could be anything really. So if you're trying to write down dialogue that is being cut off by something, by another person interrupting, by an avalanche of ice cream, I don't know, whatever it is, then you would use a dash at the end of the sentence. So no space. So it would go that dash quotation marks.
Totally.
And you wouldn't have to do any kind of terminal punctuation, no need for a period or a question mark or an exclamation point. The dash kind of serves that role.
Of course it does.
Because it's a very fancy actor. So I wouldn't say that the dash as an actor can perform the same roles as terminal punctuation, as periods or question marks or exclamation points, but rather I would say that it's cutting off the sentence before we can even get to where those would live.
Okay, yeah, it's saying there would have been more words in this sentence and then terminal punctuation, but...
So that's what dashes can do. They are used to mark interruptions in the structure of a sentence. Like, I ran to the bus stop, but the bus had already driven away.
They can act like parentheses when they're used in pairs. So, like, the bug which landed on my nose had to be the size of a softball.
You can use them like a colon to lead into lists or to link an idea. So I have only ever wanted one thing, snacks.
And they can indicate interruptions in speech, like, watch out for that!
Wham!
That was good.
And those are the functions of the dash.
You got it.
You can learn anything. Give it out.
Page out.